Dear esteemed followers, this research was presented to the world several years ago by a Russian researcher named Lotus, which is perhaps the closest correct pronunciation of his name. The original title of the research is "There Are No Forests on Earth." This research, which many channels have relied upon and used as a reference, delves into intriguing topics that invite us to reconsider the world around us. We have strived to rewrite and present it to you in a simpler and clearer manner, without altering the content, neither by omission nor addition, only including some clarifications to illustrate the researcher's intent. And it is worth noting that we have reservations about some of the content in this research, but it is a good contribution. Take from it what aligns with your mind, and remember that everyone is fallible. Keep that in mind well. There are no forests on Earth. When you read this title aloud, even with the exclamation mark at the end, you will think, and every rational person will think, that I have lost my mind. And you will want to show me millions of pictures of forests. Rest assured, this is yet another deception. They are trying to make us believe that this is a forest, while the truth is that you are looking at trees that are only 30 meters tall. You might say this is sophistry and meaningless nonsense. After all, we all know what forests look like, and almost all of us have walked through them. Well, I expect that will be your reaction, and it is both logical and fair. However, after reading or watching this research, such a title will no longer seem strange to you, as it will make you completely rethink your concept of forests. Now, let's start with the well-known image where children see 9 dolphins, while adults see 2 lovers. Quite a significant difference, isn't it? Try to see the dolphins and notice how difficult it is, because the female figures refuse to transform into dolphins for most adults, which is amusing because it's the exact opposite for children. Imagine a single image, yet we perceive it entirely differently. What's more, children and adults cannot exchange their perception of what they see or how they view things. Why? It's very simple. Because the eyes see according to how they've been programmed by the Matrix, but that's not how we can perceive the real world. Over time, our eyes betray us. They've worked to make us blind since childhood, so much so that the real world is entirely different from what we see. We see things through the lens of habit and experience, a perspective that has distorted everything. We've become so accustomed to it that by the age of 30, this perspective protects your mind. But by 40, you would go mad without it. Do you think I'm exaggerating? Well, look at this picture. It's called Mesa, formed by volcanic lava about 200 million years ago when the Earth was forming. Do you think I've lost my mind? Maybe you will too. You'll understand what I mean when we return to this piece of grass later. For now, just remember how we stumbled upon this ancient stump. Sometimes, people try to take pictures of themselves attempting to hug a trunk that cannot be embraced. But think about it seriously. These trees are ancient and rare, all of them documented, monitored, and preserved in sanctuaries as natural memorials. Yet, there's a buzz on the internet about forests, and everyone is asking, why are all the forests on Earth, even in Siberia, not older than 200 years? Where are the giant trees? It's true that people are outraged by this, but I want to look at the problem from another angle, from the poles of the Earth. The intriguing thing is that even Soviet biologists found something strange at the poles. They found an unnatural amount of water trapped as ice and snow, and an abnormal concentration of carbon dioxide in the world's oceans. These unnatural concentrations tell us that a global fire occurred in the past. Using simple math, these scientists concluded that these fires wiped out 99% of the living beings on Earth. Naturally, we all know that living cells are made of hydrogen and carbon. So the polar ice is primarily composed of water from the burning of living organisms in the distant past. Consider this number, 99%. This means that everything that grows, crawls, flies, swims, or runs on Earth is now 20,000 times smaller in size than it was before this catastrophe. 20,000 times. To grasp this number, look at this image. This piece of bread represents humans, plants, and animals. A mere small, pitiable piece on this large truck representing the living beings. I hope you understand that the myth of overpopulation in our current era is nothing but a 100% fraud and nonsense. Biologists have distributed this number across all continents, but it didn't work. Because on dry land, there isn't enough space to accommodate this number if the living beings multiplied 20,000 times. But they didn't factor in the ice and snow. Yet, the truth remains a truth, and this volume of creatures must have existed on Earth. However, as always, a sudden light can come to cast blame on conventional thinking. Forests that are 30 meters tall are like a virus that takes over our minds, especially the minds of biologists, preventing us from finding a solution to this dilemma, where the vegetative area should be much larger than it is. So, if the plants can't fit horizontally to form a convincing space, we must make them fit vertically. Here, we might have a solution to this dilemma. This new theory imagines forests of unimaginable height. And here's the exciting part, we've found these old photographs. They depict the massacre of sequoia trees in California between 1880 and 1920. These trees miraculously survived massive explosions in 1816. Imagine how long it took for these trees to grow to such immense sizes, only for these terrifying men to come with saws and axes. One by one, there were no trees left. But from the size of these severed trunks, we can deduce an equation to estimate the height of these trees. The diameter of the trunk is 3 times larger than the saw that cut it, meaning they were 3 times the size of today's trees. Think about it. Imagine yourself in a forest where the trees are not 30 meters tall as they are today, but 100 meters. These are undoubtedly fantastical forests, straight out of old tales of fairies and nymphs, forests lost due to ferocious beasts. I understand they were just workers, providing for their children and families, and that they were acting under higher authority. But if every lumberjack had refused to carry out these criminal orders, we would have preserved these forests, for their demon masters are far too arrogant to do this work themselves. And so, I will send those who defend these gleeful lumberjacks to a well-known place. Look at this picture carefully. They appear like diabolical bacteria intent on killing the plant composition of forests. As for those who believe the trees were cut and killed only for the wood, allow me to disagree. Trees are not just sources of wood, they are generators of energy, producing constant electricity, oxygen through photosynthesis, and even food. But there's something even more important. Trees possess a network of roots and a program for data exchange, which is why our ancestors had a theory that trees on Earth were programmed to store data in a special information gateway located in carbon fibers. However, I am puzzled as to why these vandals left some of the sequoia trees alive, even though they fenced them off and called them nature reserves. Of course, the guides of these reserves will tell you fanciful tales about these trees, but they won't tell you how these fools in that foolish era cleared our sequoia cover. Well, let's summarize everything. The remnants of the old giant trees have been found, and the polar ice has found its place on the new mosaic. It seems as though everything is clear, but it isn't. No truth is this simple. When we delve into the myths of nations, we find many stories about people, animals, and plants turning into stone. This is natural because paleontologists around the world have found fossilized remains of humans, animals, and plants. There are so many that old museums are crammed with fossilized frogs, clover leaves, lizards, dinosaur pieces, and the like. Frogs and clover leaves are fine, but what about forests? Where are the trees? The old sequoia trees in California don't count because they are made of carbon, which means they don't belong to the Silicon Age. How do I know this? Because they were cut down with ordinary tools, whereas all axes and saws would shatter if used to cut silicon. So, where are the silica trees if those carbon giants don't belong to the Silicon Age? Imagine, we found them. Can you guess where? In North America itself, specifically in Arizona. Many events occur in the Aryan region there. And here's the giant quarry now known as the Grand Canyon, also famous as a park. But as someone with the pseudonym Wake Up Human once said, calling the waste of an old quarry a national park is the height of irony. It's not a national park, but just the waste of a quarry. This is the Aryan city that existed 50,000 years ago, and nothing remains of it but this vortex, around which these savages camped just a meter away. That's the nonsense Wikipedia tells us. And by the way, here are the silicon trees. Allow me to introduce you to the museum under the open sky. Here, in the desert, petrified trees are scattered around, enclosed by a fence, and anyone can visit this circus called the Petrified Forest National Park. In this park, the petrified fossils are not just common, they are unique. While turtles and frogs have turned into pale gray stones, these trees have astonishingly transformed into gemstones. Beautiful stones, aren't they? So, it's time for an assessment. All our forests are young, and their trees do not exceed 30 meters in height. But we found traces of fairy forests in the Sequoia region of California. Although biologists have replaced them with columns of ice and snow, we've discovered petrified fossils from the Silicon Age and trees made of gemstones. Now, everything is convincing and in the correct order, right? Or is it not? In a perfect world, everything is convincing and in the correct order. But in our world, cursed by hell, nothing is convincing and nothing is in the correct order. When I was a child and saw petrified fossils on a television program, this question haunted me. How can a frog turn into stone instead of decomposing like any other organic being? Let's see what Wikipedia tells us. Certain and rare conditions must be met for a trunk to turn into fossil wood or petrified wood, the most important of which is that it must be buried in an oxygen-free environment, preserving its organic structure and overall appearance. I believe this is British dry humor, but if it's not, let me try to explain. Scientists say that for a living being to turn into stone, some sudden catastrophe is required, such as a volcanic eruption, a tsunami, or a mudslide that covers the frog quickly, preventing bacteria from turning the body into compost. In simpler terms, for a living being to turn into stone, it must be covered or submerged and then compressed. And according to those we call scientists, the organic tissues, once alive, magically turn into silicon. Remember this equation, and if you've recently buried your pet, hurry and dig it up, because your beloved pet is now petrified, and you can place its statue on the table. Do you want to scold me for this dark joke? Direct your scolding to the official scientific community that sells us such nonsense, because the truth is that a dead organic body has only two options: it either dries out like an insect in a piece of amber, or, the second option, simply decomposes. But organic bodies never turn into rubble, never, ever. This sophistry was invented to hide the truth. However, if the magical transformation from an organic body to stone is a believable lie, but the transformation of wood into gemstones? Here, lies and ignorance become uncontrollable. Tell me how? How can a wooden stick turn into a gemstone? You may not have an answer, but I do. And we will discuss that later. But for now, let's understand what these gemstones are showing us. First and foremost, according to the official narrative, these trees lost an uneven battle against a nearby volcano. Note that this occurred 225 million years ago. This wasn't merely a fire or decomposition in moist soil. Defying all the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, these trees were magically transformed into precious gemstones. I can almost see David Copperfield nervously smoking in the background. But hold on, these trees weren't simply broken, they were sawed into small, nearly equal pieces. Well then, I'd love to know the brand of the saw used by the indigenous people. I'm joking, of course, but we must conclude that this is not a museum, it's a stage. Someone cut these trees and transported them here, for only a fool would believe that wood could turn into precious stones and jewels. Here's another question. For what purpose did they create this circus with all these scattered remnants of silicon life forms? And did you notice the small size of these trees? They don't even compare to the sequoias in California. But this is a trivial matter. These aren't trees, they're branches. Branches of the colossal silicon trees. These trees were so enormous that an American sequoia beside them would appear as a mere stick next to a baobab tree. And while tourists marvel at these gemstones, no one pays attention to the background, because everything is hidden in plain sight. To understand what I'm talking about, let's revisit that patch of grass we discussed earlier, and let me ask you again, what do you see? A tree stump amidst daisies? No, this is a mesa, formed from a volcanic explosion at the dawn of Earth's creation, about 200 million years ago. Don't believe me? Well, do you believe me now? Allow me to introduce you to Devil's Tower, or what is referred to as a laccolith, which supposedly formed from a volcanic eruption at the dawn of Earth's creation, about 200 million years ago. At least, that's what Wikipedia tells us, and millions around the world believe that this is a mesa, or a laccolith, or a mountain. Really? Let's approach this so-called mountain and take a closer look at its fantastical columns that defy logical explanation, and then check Wikipedia again. Volcanic rocks are formed by the cooling and solidification of molten lava. What an intelligent volcanic eruption! It must have been standing perfectly in place until it hardened into these flawless hexagonal columns, towering 300 meters into the sky. They are so precise you could calibrate engineering instruments with these miraculous columns, as if they were extruded from a sugar icing injector, bundled at the top like a broom, and then dried quickly by a giant fan. Perhaps the columns of the Parthenon or St. Isaac's Cathedral were constructed in the same way. Dear scientists, have you lost your minds to write such nonsense? And people, have you lost yours to believe it? The claim that this engineering marvel was created by a fountain of molten lava is as absurd as saying that a racing car appeared on the track due to an explosion in a Ferrari factory. Have you ever seen what a lava fountain looks like? It seems that back in those days, lava had artificial intelligence. Upon comparative analysis, all the columns are hexagonal. Why specifically hexagonal? Because the masterpieces of the universe are built on this shape. Look, snowflakes are not completely identical, but they all form a perfect hexagon. Even without basic mathematical knowledge, they know that the hexagon is the most efficient shape for enclosing space. When bees construct a honeycomb, they instinctively create it to be spacious while conserving wax, for the hexagon is the most economically efficient shape for building a honeycomb. Even blind sheep could understand that our universe is constructed on decimal numbers. Therefore, it doesn't matter on what scale you study the idea, whether it be the scale of a mountain or the scale of a tree. Now, let's open a botany book and examine the structure of any plant to compare it with our giant trunk. We won't delve too deeply here. We are merely seeking the facts in the images of the trunks to make it futile to argue against them. Allow me to present to you a cross-section of a flax stem. Well, dear biologists, do you notice anything? No? Look closer, it appears as if there's a honeycomb in the center. Amazing, they are all hexagonal. What a coincidence. And if we strip away the outer layer of this flax, it will resemble our very own trunk. Now, let's take a look at the small rocks around it. Did you notice that the flax looks exactly like our trunk from a bird's eye view? They appear perfectly identical. The fibers of the trunk, much like those of flax, exhibit a hexagonal geometric shape along the entire length of the stem, extending to a staggering 384 meters. It is important to note that the fibers of the trunk demonstrate even greater precision in their proportions, as we have learned from botanical studies. The variation in length makes no difference, for these fibers are interconnected, resembling a branch of a hexagonal section after leaving the metal rolling mill. Moreover, the fibers are not adhered to one another, thus they fall away freely as the stone erodes. Additionally, each fiber of the trunk is covered by a thin membrane, akin to fascia, a delicate layer of fibrous tissue that surrounds muscles or other organs. As you can see, the outer petrified layer has crumbled over time due to moisture and wind, which serves as clear evidence that the trunk's fibers consist of at least two elements nested within each other. Furthermore, the fibers do not penetrate the ground vertically. Instead, they gradually bend to resemble the root system of any tree. So, as you can see, the official story about the sudden and accidental solidification of molten lava is nothing but sheer nonsense, and it quickly falls apart. I recall that in 1977, Hollywood produced a film titled Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in which Devil's Tower played the leading role. We were told countless times that this was a mountain where one could encounter extraterrestrial beings. But this absurdity is fit only for the gullible. Where were your eyes, esteemed scientists? Biologists, geologists, paleontologists, are you listening to me? Are you studying the world from behind a welder's mask? Now, let's determine the height of the trunk that was once a tree. We'll use the formula I mentioned earlier. The diameter of our trunk at the base is 300 meters, so if we multiply 300 by 20, we'll get the height. Are you ready? 6,000 meters. Think about that, it's simple, and everything we learn is through comparison. I believe we can place a significant mark here. Devil's Tower is the colossal stump of a gigantic silica tree, with all the characteristics of a natural trunk that we've all seen. But we must not underestimate the matrix that has corralled all the cattle into the stables. I am certain that even after all this clear evidence, there will still be people deeply asleep, demanding more proof. That's fine, but if you think these were all my arguments and evidence, allow me to disappoint you. I still have many trump cards up my sleeve, and I will relish every moment I lay them on the table. Well, we've understood everything about this trunk, and it's time to move on to the next one, isn't it? You may have thought this was a singular example. Just remove the blindfold from your eyes, and you will see many more. Let me introduce you to the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. Have you noticed something familiar? Look closely. Here they are again, hexagonal columns. If you haven't noticed the resemblance between them and Devil's Tower, then you are completely blind. It's the same gigantic trunk, but it didn't rise from the earth. This tree grew directly by the sea. The Giant's Causeway consists of approximately 40,000 of these geometric hexagonal columns, envied by every bee in the world. Naturally, the science enthusiasts declared this area a national natural reserve. As I mentioned earlier, the same person, under the pseudonym Wake Up, Human, said, "It is the height of irony to call Quarry Waste a national park." But what do Quarry Waste and this place have in common? I'll explain that later. For now, imagine what official science says about this Irish trunk. The Giant's Causeway is an area composed of about 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, the result of an ancient volcanic eruption. A volcanic eruption? Please, tell me how I can remain calm and not explode in a fountain of curses directed at this scientific community. This is extremely difficult. But I'll try to stay calm, simply because our enemies want us to be angry. I have just two questions. First, how many years did Sissy Campbell remain in a coma? Perhaps the researcher means Heather Campbell, the girl who was in an accident and was predicted by doctors to remain in a coma for 30 years, yet she awoke after just 2. Or maybe it refers to a character from a drama we don't know. The second question, why don't we say that a beehive is the result of an ancient volcanic eruption? There's absolutely no difference at all. We could also say that the pavement tiles in the street are the result of an ancient volcanic eruption. Show me just one difference, you science enthusiasts. Now, let's go back to our old method and compare the Giant's Causeway, but this time with real volcanic lava. I just want to remind you how volcanic lava flows and how it solidifies. Let us now compare Devil's Tower with the Giant's Causeway. Forgive me, I mean let's compare one silica trunk with another. I know there are still those who believe in the volcanic lava fountain, but if I didn't know about the giant silicon trees, I'd rather believe in a giant cream injector and fan than in this volcanic nonsense. And if you think these two giant trees are the only examples, you're mistaken. There are many more on Earth. The funniest part is that ordinary people don't realize these are cut trees, but official science recognized this seriously. So, they had to find a way to hide these trees from those who ask too many questions, and they came up with the brilliant name for these silicon trees: basalt cliffs. Notice these two pictures where fibers hang from the ceiling. How can the idea of a volcanic explosion explain that? The lava must have dripped, but some droplets didn't reach the ground. Instead, they adhered in their hexagonal form to other large droplets that somehow managed to reach the Earth. Look at this picture too. Just an ordinary picture of a girl. A beautiful picture, right? But the one thing the girl doesn't realize is that she's sitting next to the trunk of a silicon tree. All the evidence is out in the open for everyone to see, but the matrix perspective doesn't allow us to see 9 dolphins. There are plenty of images of silicon trunks on the internet. You can research this topic yourself. Google will help you. Let me introduce you to another hexagonal miracle of the Earth, also of silicon nature. It is the largest salt flat in the world, called Sala de Uyuni in Bolivia. As you can see, not everything is as simple as written in textbooks or shown on the Discovery Channel. As usual, let's see what Wikipedia has to say about these hexagonal shapes. But wait, the fibers of silicon trunks mentioned on Wikipedia seem to have changed slightly when discussing the hexagonal structure of this South American lake, where nothing is mentioned at all. Complete silence, as if it doesn't exist. But it's there, definitely there. You might not believe it, but Wikipedia isn't the only source that remained silent. After hours of research, I found nothing about these complex hexagonal formations. Only in one place did I find a single phrase that said, "Look, how interesting this dried and cracked salt is." I was stunned. First, under the bright sunlight, any surface cracks like this, but not in a hexagonal pattern like honeycombs. Second, cracks are depressions between surface fragments, but these are elevations, not depressions. They are the opposite of cracks. They resemble more the sheath on silicon trunk fibers. Third, why does the entire salt surface appear hexagonal? If the official story doesn't provide a logical explanation, allow me to offer my opinion. As Wake Up, Human says, there are no salt lakes, they are merely clay sediment reservoirs. I agree, but it's not exactly that. Here's why. I believe you've already realized that the hexagonal shape of honeycomb cells is a feature exclusively belonging to living organisms, whether it's a bee colony, a snowflake, or plant fibers. So, as we see with our own eyes, Sala de Uyuni is not just a gigantic layer of salt, but was once a living entity of silicon nature, scraped away by technocrats with their machines. Now you might understand how far removed we are from reality. If we can't even imagine a gigantic tree, how could we possibly imagine a creature made of salt spanning 10,000 kilometers in width? As for its height, it must have been unimaginably tall. Now you realize that 7,500 years ago, our Earth was so magnificent, astonishing, and beautiful that what James Cameron depicted in his film Avatar is merely a poor substitute for it. But all that remains for us now is a desert we've turned into a scrapyard. And I mean it was turned into scrap by their machines. In short, while our human society was asleep in the matrix, toiling away from 9 to 5 daily in useless jobs, dreaming useless dreams, our Earth was being literally stripped away by giant machines. I'll show you that later. Alright, the theoretical part is over, and the climax is near. We're close to the runway. But before that, we need to go back to our first trunk and notice something strange. I bet you didn't see it. We've seen many trunks, but Devil's Tower was unique. It has a flat surface at the top, which means the tree was cut. Yes, exactly, cut or sawed off. Now our imagination asks us, who cut it? And why? And with what did they cut it? Let's set these questions aside for now. I'll answer them later. Devil's Tower, which we've seen, is not the only one on Earth. It is a small stump compared to other trunks. Let's go. The plane is ready for takeoff. Of course, we won't have a specific route, but we'll roam the Earth. Fasten your seatbelts, and you'd better hold on tight because everything you're about to see will turn your concept of rocks and mountains upside down. As we fly, let's play a game. Find 10 differences between each pair of images, even though there are only 2, material and size. These trunks are everywhere on Earth, and there are hundreds of them. Scientists call them mesas, which means table in Spanish, because they have flat tops like a table. Aren't these trunks magnificent? Now let's return to the beginning of our discussion. We thought we had seen forests and walked through them, but does it matter if their trees are only 30 meters tall? Is there a difference? We are content with the trees that remain to us, we enjoy their beauty, and we've grown accustomed to these forests. Therefore, we don't feel the need for anything else. But we've discovered that the ancient trees have been preserved in the United States, as if they are the very trees we've read about in fairy tales and legends. So, let's cling tightly to the matrix perspective when looking at the sequoia tree in California, or else we might lose our minds. For although Devil's Tower is the stump of a tree that was 6 kilometers tall, it's a small sapling compared to other trees. For example, the plateau in Cape Town, South Africa, is truly astonishing. It has a diameter of 3 kilometers, and if we multiply 3 by 20, we get a tree with a height of 60 kilometers. Can you imagine the size of its branches? On one of these branches, we could easily establish a massive residential area, with shopping malls, schools, and parks. Imagine how enormous it is. But of course, your mind will never see that this mountain in Africa is actually a tree 10 times taller than Devil's Tower, 60 kilometers high. Even more fascinating is that this is not the ultimate height. In the writings of the Russian scientist and poet Alexander Pushkin, we can read about a giant imaginary oak tree that once existed on an island, and we believe our government killed it at some point. This oak tree was supposed to be the center of the Earth, with a height of several hundred kilometers. I'm not sure of its exact height, but it was certainly taller than the one that once stood in Cape Town. This tree was the largest plant on Earth. Remember that I mentioned at the beginning how the perspective of our mind helps preserve itself but distorts the truth. Ask anyone to choose the correct image of a tree between these two, and they'll immediately point to the green one on the grass, without noticing that it's just a pathetic shrub, closer to moss compared to the real tree. And that certainly isn't a forest. Do you now understand why we can't find the 9 dolphins? But don't trouble your mind with fish and stumps. Again, I'm just encouraging you to think on a grander scale. If, instead of dolphins and stumps, we see lovers and mountains, imagine what is hidden from us behind the curtain. That's why the concept of the apocalypse translates to the unveiling. Do you now realize why I pointed out the matrix perspective at the beginning, the one through which we view the world, only to find that we see nothing at all? The real world is different from what we perceive, and I can say that our society today is living in a true dream. But the sad part is that this statement is not a metaphor. Did you know that the phrase ancient tree in Russian, the Aryan language, consists of the syllables dereva, and the phrase ancient times consists of the syllables derevnost, meaning the time when giant ancient trees grew? Interesting, isn't it? Alright, let's set that aside and continue our journey. I believe you're about to ask me, perhaps because it's time to return to the questions. Who cut down these trees? Why were they cut? And with what were they cut? No, it's still too early to ask such questions. We know that the surface of the earth was once covered with enormous vegetation, so we might ask ourselves, where did all the other trees go? Surprisingly, these so-called mesas are few in number, because the best trees were selected for cutting, while the others were uprooted by massive explosive waves. We have shown only the trunks with flat tops, but does anyone remember what broken trees look like? I'll remind you, but do you understand my hint? No? Then let's play the same game again, and find 10 differences between the two pictures. I believe you grasp the meaning of my words. Therefore, I want you to look at the towering stumps on Earth's surface, which were once regarded as quarries but were shattered by explosions. For example, the Everest tree. As you have already guessed, there are no rocks on our land. They are all merely fragments of broken trunks. You can examine millions of pictures, but the only thing you will find are the remains of our true environment. So how do scientists in the official sciences explain the origin of rocks? I believe you've guessed that too, and now you understand why we are enchanted. And why are elite properties embedded in rocks? And why are the purest materials used for construction pieces of rock? Because even in death, they still emit a powerful energy toward us. We are mortal human beings made of carbon, while stone is the bridge between silicon and carbon-based life forms. The crucial thing you must now understand is how to distinguish between rocks and mountains, for they are entirely different. Rocks are composed of solid chunks of coarse stone with fibrous fragments reaching toward the sky. But a mountain is merely a heap of waste brought by giant machines, with an almost conical shape like all new structures. Sometimes, these heaps contain chemical waste. Sometimes, this waste reacts with itself. Sometimes, it ignites, and sometimes it explodes. At this point, the white-coated enthusiasts claim they've discovered a volcano, and will tell you tales from the crypt about how a silica trunk was formed by a lava flow 200 million years ago. Or they'll explain how the hexagonal tiles of our streets also resulted from an ancient volcanic eruption. Thus, there is no such thing as volcanoes, rocks, or mountains, and you can remove these terms from your vocabulary. From our windows, we can see that all the rocks on Earth are merely the remains of silicon-based life forms. You might wonder, were all rocks originally trees, as not all of them have structures resembling Devil's Tower? Some of these rocks have shiny, plate-like structures, or spongy petrified formations like mushrooms. This is because, just as the liver differs from the heart or the lungs, our ancient world was so diverse that we cannot know or even imagine the number of species and lineages that once existed, just like the diversity of mushrooms we know today. Let me tell you that Justine and Wake Up Human have covered this topic in great detail and have presented groundbreaking work on geology and the function of excavators. So, allow me to introduce you to this colossal excavator, one of the largest rotary excavators in the world. Observe how these machines operate. They crawl powerfully on their wheels, moving parallel to the quarry wall. Giant wheels with scoops scratch the rocks and earth, leaving behind a concave wall. It seems that geologists were hypnotized when they were students in school. And why not? They call the quarry waste natural wonders. For example, this cliff in Australia. Would you like to laugh? If you don't believe in the absurdity of the age we live in, look up Wave Rock and check the official explanation. It's unbelievable. How do people believe this? Some will ask, which stone was part of the living plant, and which was not? I want to tell you that at least 7,500 years ago, there was absolutely no such thing as stones. Everything you see now was part of our ecosystem, but some people wanted to become gods, and they destroyed everything. Open the windows of your mind. They live while we sleep. But they don't just live, they are killing our Earth. They are doing it now while you watch this video. Wake up, people, and review everything they taught you in elementary school, middle school, high school, and university. History, geography, geology. For instance, we have been told that we have achieved a level of technological advancement today that was unattainable in the past. Well, open your minds and examine these images. We possess numerous artifacts that we cannot replicate today due to certain technicians who have concealed technology from us, leading to a shortage of equipment and experts. These relics are evidence that our civilization was far more advanced even 200 years ago, and before, compared to our present day. Today, we are merely children playing in the sand. Here are a few examples. The Babalvo bath. Made of granite and weighing 48 tons. We are told that this bathtub was crafted manually over 7 years, and is polished daily as if by Papa Carlo. Referring to the man who made the Pinocchio puppet. What nonsense! As a certified lathe operator of the 5th level, I tell you that this work represents the precision of a machine. The concave and convex surfaces of this tub are so precise across the entire diameter, and the spherical surface at the bottom, both inside and out, is impeccably crafted. Thus, it is impossible to achieve such work by hand, especially when it comes to polishing. I believe this piece was produced recently using machines, and the polishing technique is identical to that used on the columns of St. Isaac's Cathedral. Completing this work without high precision, high-speed polishing machines is virtually impossible. The second example, the Alexandrian column. Weighing 610 tons, standing 27 meters tall, and made of granite. It is impossible to produce this manually without rotating it on a lathe, as the column has a curvature that cannot be achieved by hand. The third example, Ollantaytambo in Peru. These are polygonal blocks connected together, ranging in weight from 40 to 120 tons. You can see the level of precision used yourself, as the blocks are parallel in 3 dimensions. The Capella Sansevero. Made from a single piece of marble, and it is impossible to achieve such a work without the use of an advanced CNC machine. In the last 50 years, nothing has emerged that even approaches the complexity of this statue, and no sculptor has ever created anything comparable, not even with the latest CNC machines. The stone bridge in Sevastopol, where each polygonal stone in the bridge is a separate sculpture, while here is an example of modern work. The stone on the left is considered acceptable by today's standards. Maybe you know that entire cities were built from stone in the old style, with pre-planned streets, roads, dams, and so on, and the cities were often surrounded by a stone wall equal in size to the entire city's construction. But somewhere between 1780 and 1815, we experienced a nuclear war. Perhaps not the first in the world, which led to a nuclear winter in 1816, a year without summer, known to the Anglo-Saxons as the Year of Frozen Death. Here are some Google Earth snapshots showing nuclear craters in places like Belarus. You can easily find such craters, and the white remnants around them are made of crushed limestone, the primary raw material of that time. To grasp the extent of the damage, search for Roger Fenton Crimea or James Robertson Crimea, and you'll find that these early photographers, sent to Crimea in 1853 after the nuclear war to capture images of the siege of Sevastopol, left us photos bearing witness to this war and destruction. Here is an image from Sevastopol, photographed by Roger Fenton. Compare the vegetation then with that of today. You may also observe that, up until the 18th century, houses were entirely built from limestone, and advanced machines were used to cut the stone into perfect rectangles. Notice that all the houses in the old cities of the Soviet Union are covered with a layer of clay, 3 to 4 meters deep, yet these buildings have retained their quality. They have been buried for 200 years, and during the Soviet era, these limestone-built homes were considered exceptionally well-made. Here are further examples of what humanity accomplished in the past using advanced, giant machinery. This is Eski Kerman, and illiterate guides will tell you that this is one of the cave cities in the Crimean Peninsula, where people lived in the past. When I asked about this path, I was told it was made by the wheels of local nobles' carriages. And here is another so-called cave city in Crimea. This is a modern quarry where limestone is extracted. Also, this photo was taken before the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, showing precisely cut slices of limestone, with a railway track running below where houses were built. Now, here's an important photograph taken in 1890 of a quarry called Spani. You can easily see the carved passages through the hill, 100 meters wide and 80 meters high. Beneath the vertical wall, we can see small pieces of limestone and debris that fell due to drilling by machines. And in front of the passages, houses are clearly visible. Some of these passages are the beginnings of catacombs, some extending for hundreds of kilometers. They conducted large-scale mining to extract limestone. And during World War II, hospitals, warehouses, and command posts were set up inside the catacombs, with trucks freely entering and exiting. By the way, there are catacombs in almost every city in the world. And near Odessa, there is a catacomb stretching 1,500 kilometers. So, what we knew as rocks, gorges, valleys, and cliffs are nothing more than quarry waste, and there are many ancient and modern quarries. This white rock in Belogorsk near Crimea, is a limestone quarry where the wall was formed as a result of cutting the slope. Would you like to see more? Look at this passage where a large block of limestone was extracted. They lied to you about it. Guess what they call it? They call it a valley. It's a beautiful wonder of the earth, but check out this photo. It's an old photograph to the same place from the 19th century, where no vegetation had yet grown over the limestone. And here's an old painting from 1855, where we can see the waste of the massive ancient quarry in the background. Are you astonished by the scale of mining in the Crimean Peninsula alone? Well, let me tell you more. There is not a cubic meter, possibly to a depth of 100 meters, across the entire earth that has not been extracted, ground, and chewed up in that era. So, we live in a massive quarry waste pit, where the entire periodic table of elements, Mendeleev's table, was extracted in the most violent and barbaric manner. Now look at these pictures, and pay attention to the stepped structure of the quarries. The extracted blocks, cut by massive rotary machines, show right angles when viewed from above. I want to show you now images of mountains, hills, valleys, passages, and slopes, almost uninhabited today, which are romantically named, often after those who discovered them. I really wonder, are all academics, professors of geology, and other science enthusiasts blind not to see this? Look at these images. The mountain in the Kola Peninsula, whose name I do not know. Mountains in Antarctica, which were only discovered in 1820. Even here, in Antarctica, we find traces of heavy machinery and equipment. Greenland, the Watkins Mountains. Look at the scale of mining. Another image of Greenland from a flight from Frankfurt to Los Angeles. John Bighorn, the highest mountain in Greenland, at 3,700 meters. No problem, it's almost entirely hollowed out. Svalbard in Norway, with the aurora borealis in the background of quarry waste. The Transantarctic Mountains, where traces of machinery are still visible at the base. Again, the Transantarctic Mountains, where we see quarry systems. Mount Kailash in Tibet, standing 6,830 meters tall. Have you ever seen in our time heavy mining equipment reaching such heights? Goblin Valley State Park in Utah, USA. The Gloss Mountains in Oklahoma. The Grand Canyon in Arizona, USA. It's just a giant quarry waste zone, while millions of tourists believe they're gazing upon one of the world's wonders, simply because they've been told so. The quarry itself again, where no signs of water erosion are found, only traces of explosives on silicon plants. The Rock Quarry in Pittsburgh. The Grand Canyon Quarry once more, where we see the marks of stone cutting by circular saw. A quarry in Australia, in the Blue Mountains. The Blue Mountains from another angle. And the same mountains again, where we see the vertical wall. Compare it to the marble quarry in the Alps. And here's the marble quarry in the Alps. A massive quarry, and I don't know where this desktop background image came from online. Caprock Canyons in the Texas National Park. Another national park created from exhausted quarry waste in the USA. Note that in some quarries, there is a high level of moisture, so people grow crops. These are now the rice terraces, like rice terraces in Bono. Here are the rice terraces again in Bono. And this is the National Cliff of Chile in the USA, where it seems saws carved out the tunnels. These are the so-called Painted Hills in Oregon. Raven Mountains in South Africa. The Orange River and the mountains. Timna National Park in Palestine, it's just a quarry. The Green Valley Quarry in China. The submerged Shurik Reservoir Quarry in Uzbekistan. The submerged quarry from another angle. As you can see, there are no natural rocks, mountains, valleys, or slopes on Earth. Have you ever pondered that while people argue online about whether the Earth is flat, like a pie, or perhaps slightly concave, our leaders are literally devouring our land, transforming it into deserts and scrapyard? Can you imagine quarries on Earth as large as some countries? For instance, in Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Iran, there is virtually no soil left in many areas of these countries, as the top layer of Earth, to a depth of 100 meters, has been stripped of all forms of life. It seems as though the Aral Sea and the Caspian Sea are merely massive submerged quarries. Indeed, all regions on the world maps that appear yellow on Google Maps are the sunken waste pits of quarries. Observe, in the center of this image is a cluster of vehicles. If we were to fill this quarry with a 15-meter layer of water, it would resemble the Sea of Azov. And this is the Sea of Azov, an old quarry now submerged. Note the smooth bottom, where giant rotating machines once operated. The maximum depth is 15 meters, and thorium may have been extracted from here. Here is the edge of the Karakum Desert, an area spanning 350,000 square kilometers. It seems that planet harvesters once worked here. In fact, the Yangakala Canyon Quarry in Turkmenistan appears to many as one of the wonders of the world, as does the Tibetan Plateau Quarry in Kazakhstan. The Monument Valley in the United States was once several hundred meters higher, with remnants of silica trees visible in the background. And this is the Monument Valley from another angle. Also in Namibia, this desert is the floor of a quarry. And in Egypt, the upper soil layer was stripped, and all life within it was incinerated by a nuclear explosion. Additionally, most of Australia has been completely stripped, leaving only a red desert behind. Here is Australia again. And this is the desert in Nigeria. This is Krivoporia, the Don River in Russia. And Krivoporia from another angle. In the middle of this tree-covered island stood a rotary excavator. This is Krutoval in Switzerland, most likely the work of a rotary excavator. Finally, the Nipari Quarry in Siberia. The conclusion is that deserts are entirely man-made, resulting from long-term mining activities. Therefore, you can easily and safely replace terms such as valleys, passages, rocks, and gorges with terms like quarry, mine, submerged quarry, and submerged mine. Now, let us examine the largest heaps of waste, officially known as volcanoes. Look at this image. This is a mound of rocky waste in Donbass, Ukraine, reaching a height of 300 meters. Inside it, chemical reactions occur, leading to combustion, and sometimes explosions when the internal pressure increases. Allow me to present this heap of waste, called Vesuvius in Italy. It stands 1,281 meters tall, but obsessed scientists will tell you it is a volcano, because it burns, and it even erupted once. And this is Mount Fuji in Japan. What is happening here? How do people believe what I cannot accept? We live in a desert and a giant quarry that we have turned into a scrapyard. So, if you think our leaders are merely deceiving us, you are still asleep. And if you think the earth is flat, you are half awake. Since we cannot trust anyone, perhaps it is time to think for ourselves. Reflect on what you have been told throughout your life and question everything. The earth is not as it appears through the matrix perspective we have been conditioned to accept. Open your eyes and minds and contemplate. Are you still asleep?